Elevated Grapes Podcast.
Elevated Grapes Podcast.
With your host, Sethi.
Your host, Sethi.
And Stylist Rashi Bindra.
It's time to get started.
Let's talk fashion, shall we?
Welcome everyone, I am your host Sethi.
I'm Stylist Rashi Bindra.
So today on the show we have a very special guest. His name is Daniel Pillai and he's a media personality and PR pro. So prior to being in PR, he worked on television and digital media, specifically in entertainment and a lot of entertainment gossip from what I understand. He's been featured on networks such as Omni, City TV, CBC, Global, Toronto Star, The National, in terms of newsprints, and as well as the Wall Street Journal, just to name a few. And on top of that, he is a fashion superstar. So we're super excited to have him on here. He is famously known for his blog called Date with Daniel. So Daniel, thank you so much for being on our show and giving us your time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And listen, I've got a lot of time these days, so I'm happy to be here.
So what we were going to start with telling us about yourself a little bit, but you brought in an interesting topic. Time is sort of everyone's friend right now. You know, we're all gifted with this time. So what are you doing with your time that you find to hold the most value for your time?
So you see, in the media space, as the three of us will know, it's very fast paced. It's just always moving. You're on to the next before you even get a chance to get adjusted to the present. And so it wasn't surprising to me that I found myself doing just that in a new industry, which was PR. It's still connected, like you're still in the media space, you're still working with the same people in a new capacity, and you're working with brands, but it's on the go, always on, all the time. So prior to this, I just had a number of different events happening throughout Canada. I was kind of lined up to travel every week for a couple of months. And, when I first started traveling for work, I really enjoyed it, but I was sort of dreading this nonstop travel. So, when COVID sort of hit, it just forced us to stop, those events got canceled. Suddenly my schedule got clear. I got busy doing things that I wouldn't normally have time to do, like take a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A walk. Like, when was the last time I took a walk,
Oh my goodness. I've taken so many walks.
Yeah. To go and grab my morning cup of coffee at Tim Hortons in peace without having to rush and worry about missing a bus or a subway. It was crazy. So I was happy to be forced to stop and kind of take a pause. But with that has come a lot of reflection. I'm reading a lot. I'm connecting with a lot of people. I'm making time for opportunities like this. Speaking in an interview setting, I always walk away with something new. Always. Whether I'm interviewed or I'm talking to somebody else. So I always love that. Getting a chance to spend time with family and friends. Chewing my food.
That's a big one.
What is it? It's supposed to be 23 chews before you swallow? 30. Oh my goodness. I don't know. Then I've been doing it wrong my whole life.
Listen, I would barely have time to even have a proper meal,
Right.
I was really happy to suddenly have this abundance of time and then figure out great ways to do some good stuff and stay productive. So that's what I've been doing. Yeah.
So you mentioned something really interesting there, and I think there's a common element for both you and Rashi on this topic. But self-reflection has also been a big part of your journey and sort of the spiritual side of it. So tell us a little bit about that at a high level, and then obviously we'll dig in deeper on specific areas. But tell us a bit about your spiritual journey and self-reflection and what that means to you.
It's pretty ongoing and it's ever changing. I'm never the same person every day, right? I think we'd all agree that we're constantly changing with each new second, each new breath. So every day is different, but I'd say that I really sort of stepped into a very spiritual space and spiritual existence when I, came out about my sexuality back in 2010. So it's been a decade, it's been 10 years. And that really allowed me, once I told people that I was gay, it was sort of, the floodgates opened up. We had attention to how things smelled, and it smelled differently than it did before, and things would taste differently, and things would feel differently, because now I was tapping into who I was. And I sort of took an opportunity to understand what that was. Why are things so different? And I understood that spiritually, my mind, body, and my soul, it was all aligning to my greater purpose. And it was now finding a synchronicity, in my body, in my physical life, because I've now allowed myself to be who I was in its natural flow, as opposed to being somebody who I'm not, based off of what my parents wanted, based off what my culture said, or based off of any peer pressure that I was feeling. So that was the beginning. Now, I mean, those are very big statements and very vague statements, but as the years went on, I really sort of understood, and I went to books. And then recently I've been really learning about the lunar cycles and, understanding what planets are in retrograde. Like Mercury is in retrograde right now, right?
Right.
I had some technical difficulties, not surprised. But understanding how I flow with the universe, I think that's what I think spirit is, or being spiritual is, understanding how you flow with the energy around you and in you, and finding your resonance, and how that, finds synchronicity with the people around you as well. And that is changing all the time.
And I think that you said such a key thing right here, because, okay, so just very briefly, I was always spiritual, but I was never around people who were spiritual. So growing up, I kind of like shut that side of me down, and I went through the whole trying to find who I was. This year, life has a very funny way of really showing you who you are. And I call it my 6-month journey, and that's going to be tomorrow, actually. But I ended up tapping into my spiritual side, completely owning who I was. And if that meant changing relationships with your family or your friends, or just like evolving. And to your point, yes, things do taste different. How you treat your body, your mind, yourself becomes very, very different, and how you even interact with people. And then as I started owning it and stop being scared of coming out, even on, Instagram or whatever, and adding posts that talk about the lunar cycle, that talk about Reiki principles, that talk about, tapping into yourself, I noticed that it's a very different energy, and very different people started approaching me. So my love for fashion is still there, but now it's just more like, how do I bring that peace in what I'm doing? And like you said, it really forced us to slow down. So I can totally relate to when things start changing and you're transitioning into it, how it makes a difference. So yeah, that's like a huge key element, being your true self, and it makes a big difference. Yeah.
What you said there is important too, about attracting likeness. Like once you opening up and being in a certain type of energy, in a certain type of space, then you attract people on that same vibe. And things are so much greater. That's where you get great ideas, great fashions. So much greatness can come together when so many people are on the same wavelength. It's amazing.
And it comes down to that whole, having that abundance mindset. Like, I'm sure in media and in fashion, we've been in, situations where we don't want to share our network. We do not want to give that contact to someone. We're very scared to bring an assistant stylist on set with us, because we're thinking, oh my God, that person's going to happen. And you're just like, there's enough for everyone, But
I'm so glad you said it, because from my experience, the media space, I think we all exist in different areas. For me, media, on-air talent, whether it was digital or TV, everybody just had such a lack mentality. And it's funny how, like, I got sucked up into all that stuff too, and you don't. But it never became that bad for me. Like, I had some level of foundation and balance. But by the time I became aware of it, it's like everybody's trying to be something they're not. Nobody's paying attention to the gifts and the talents they have and showcasing that in the best way possible. They're always trying to be like someone else, dress like someone else, or being told they need to be somebody else, right? And what it does to you is just trains you to understand that you're not good enough to be doing what you're doing. So you need to pretend to be something else to feel worthy of being where you are. And I found that kind of ridiculous, And so I'm starting to understand that, at times I may have been unaware because, there's a really fast deadline, or you're running to a person. But I now understand that when I felt uncomfortable in certain situations, I know why. It's because there wasn't much positivity or abundance in that room that day. I understood why I was feeling a certain way in hindsight.
And yeah, that's exactly the same thing. Like now when I like look back to last year or even like 2 years from now and I think about why did this happen or did this not happen, um, it's like you said, you were in that lack mentality, you were uncomfortable, you were trying to be somebody that you're not because it's supposed to be this way. You're supposed to fit in a mold. But the minute you step out of it and you're just like, let's let me be, things just keep coming and somehow time opens up for you. I mean, that's what I've been like experiencing. I've been like trying to do or create projects that, once we leave our house I can do, but somehow the time is slowly coming my way, like, oh yes, I do have time to work on this, I do have time to work on that. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
That's the universe giving you time.
Yes.
I also think
100%.
I also think things coming to you is a part of the confidence you build, and for every person their path is a little bit different. Like if, for example, if spirituality has found you your path to give you the internal confidence to be who you are, to express the way you are, express yourself in your own skin, the world is naturally going to flock and bring you the type of partners, the type of business, the type of friends, the type of that similar type of energy. So you are surrounded with that level of positivity.
Hmm.
If you're, like Daniel, you said, we're all in the world of media, and it's like, well, you're not accepted because you're not like X person, or you don't host like this person, or you can't act like this person. But that person at some point was a nobody too, and they acted like themselves and they became somebody, right? And it's almost the same thing. Like you have to let yourself be yourself in order for these things to happen, for that type of energy to come towards you, for, like as Rashi mentioned, for that type of confidence to be built in internally, so that you can go out and be who you are. I think that internal journey is that X factor you need to be able to have all those things come towards you.
Yeah. And a part of that internal journey is your intuition. Because a lot of people, they, recently, and more so because I'm sharing more of it now on my Instagram, but a lot of people have been asking me, it's like, how do you become more spiritual? And I mean, we are all spiritual beings. Like,
We are, yes.
Absolutely.
Mind, body philosophy, and soul philosophy, that trio exists for a reason. And it all starts with your intuition. Like,
Yes.
that inner voice that you get that you constantly try to ignore is you not being spiritual, or not giving your value there. Or, that first thought that comes to your mind in a situation, that's your gut instinct. That's your intuition speaking to you. But it's funny because that first thought is often the one that gets ignored or doubted, and you go to your second thought.
Yes.
It's your intuition. Like if you learn to just start listening to what you're saying to yourself, you're already there. You open that first door, and then everything else will fall into place. Exactly what you're saying, that internal journey. But it's that one thing that I feel that people constantly suppress.
Mm-hmm.
I did, and I know we're South Asians sitting here too. Like our culture is notorious for telling you not to listen to yourself and listen to
Absolutely.
everyone else, right?
Yeah.
So
listen to auntie and uncle.
Yes.
What are they gonna say?
Because some of the most spiritual practices that are known across the world come from our cultures.
Right.
Yes.
Religions.
Yes.
But it's funny because you're being told not to do that for your own health and for who you are right from the beginning. So just an interesting connection there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It actually is.
So for you it's especially interesting, and because you mentioned something that was really important. For you, it's difficult to come out until almost, like you said, 2010, and a lot of that was, cultural or suppressed, as being being like feeling of being suppressed in your ability to be yourself and to express yourself the way you want to express yourself. Why 2010? What was different, or what changed for you at that point where you're like, this is like, I have to do this?
So I never had that moment, this I have to do this moment. It just kind of all happened.
Mm-hmm.
Very sudden. Like it was just fast. Like I just woke up one day and I said, okay, I'm gay, I'm going to tell my mom. Like that's really how it was,
Mm-hmm.
honest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a drama queen. I can dramatize this if I wanted to, but that's just, it is what it is.
Drama makes for good listening.
But I think leading up to that,
right,
there was a lot of, obviously, growing up, I was obviously much more effeminate than any of the other boys in my family. I've got one sister younger than me, but my mom's the youngest of 14 kids. So I grew up with a very large extended family, and most of them all were here in Toronto. So I had a lot of older male cousins who were just very alpha male. And, then here I came, always a little bit more effeminate, with a love for the color pink. I loved playing with my female cousins. I loved playing with dolls. I resonated more with women. I wouldn't go out where the groups of men were, So this was all noticed, and it was always made blatantly obvious to me because they tease me, they press me, and like, why are you like this? Like, why are you girly? Like nudging me and laughing at the same time, understanding that I don't have an answer to it, but they've made a judgment about it.
Yeah, of course. The judgment's already been made.
Yeah. So I grew up just knowing I was different in that regard, right? And I knew that I was different because I was girlier. But then I didn't know why I was like that, right? Right? You don't know any better. So there were experiences like that. And then I think as I grew older, you start getting bullied in school. Then I started getting made fun of for my high-pitched voice or my feminine gestures. And I started to kind of close up a little. I try to watch the way my hands are moving. I try not to speak as much.
Wow.
I would try to watch my voice, and that went on for years, right until high school. I'd avoid walking down certain hallways because I knew certain kind of guys would be around. They'd be the most vocal. I had very few women who would bully me. I mean, I had a lot of girls bully me growing up, but it was mostly the guys that took over. And I grew up in a very prominent South Asian community in Brampton. So I was just, now I will describe it as such, like just surrounded by so much toxic masculinity,
Yep.
But you have to be forgiving at the same time. I mean, these guys weren't told or taught any better. They were just going by the codes that they had absorbed and like the information that they had been given, and lacking so much self-awareness and how they're actually treating others. So many of which have completely changed since I've seen them in high school. So, we're all going through an evolutionary process. But at that time, it was difficult to be around those people. And so naturally, I just grew up with a huge discomfort of being who I was. Not understanding that it was a sexuality issue. I had buried that so deep into my subconsciousness, I was not addressing it. I was too busy just trying to dress, act, and be a certain way. And, as I got into university, you have so much more acceptance of the LGBTQ community and other minority groups. And then I started to kind of feel that sense of that welcome and that sense of, togetherness and community. And I started to really understand myself and step into my experiences. And, I really came to a point just before 2010, Sagar, just to come back to that year. There were a few years I was trying my best to make relationships with women work too, dating, meeting people, forming emotional bonds and having multiple long distance relationships, because it was easier for me to maintain those, build an emotional bond and a commitment, and then try to do the physical.
Right.
Well, it's so interesting. It's such an interesting perspective I would not have thought of.
And I didn't realize that it was comfortable for me to make it more long distance because I didn't have to worry about my hands or my voice. Like I could control what I was giving to somebody or giving to that woman. And then when it would translate in the physical, things would dissipate real quickly. You can only love to a certain extent. I don't think that they were trying to be judgmental, but I think they understood that I was trying to be something I wasn't. But none of them would ever say that to my face. I think they were compassionate enough to understand that the situation is not for me. It's also not for him. So it's better that I just, end this as nicely as I can so that he can go on in his journey. I never had somebody be like, you are gay, whatever. I never had. But, from each of these failed relationships, each of these failed connections, I would just be like, why? Like, why? I'd go just get into a deeper slump, It
was almost like you're blaming yourself.
It's almost like I'm blaming myself. I was not loving myself. I was hating myself for just being different. And the gay didn't even come into my vocabulary, because I think when I was younger, I was always told I was gay. And I just really never knew what that was to begin with. So I kind of shut the doors on that. But I had a growing sense of discomfort in who I was. And all of these experiences would lead to that. And then finally, I was just sick and tired of it, I am a true Aquarian in this regard. That once I'm done dealing with it, I am
done.
And I was done. I was like, I became so overweight. I would sleep through food. I was like, what the hell is this crap? I need to free myself. And Ricky Martin had just come out around then, and he had his book, and I read his book. And then, there was Lady Gaga was doing her music, and she was so pro-gay. There was just so much of it all over the place. And I'm like, you know what? I just came to my sense of self, and then I woke up one day and told my family. That's really how it was.
So
yeah.
Something interesting that I wanted to ask you, like you said earlier in your life when you were younger, you suppressed it yourself. You almost like you dug it deep inside you and didn't bring it out. But at some point, even as a child or in grade school or high school, at some point you knew, like you knew, okay, this is who I am. This is my interest. This is the person I am. When did that hit you? Like, because there's a lot of people that think, and if they still think that they need to really reassess their thought process. But a lot of still people think you can control it. Like it's not something you're born with. It's something you learn or something that you choose to do. So to make that life choice when you were younger to suppress those emotions and feelings, it had to have been a challenge. So at what point were you like? I'm not talking about 2010 when you came out and told people, but internally for yourself. At what point were you accepting of that part of your life and being like, this is who I am, and that's just what it is?
Oh, that was 2010 for me.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, like, I mean, I wasn't as evolved. And I think I need to go back here a little bit. Like, I didn't have the happiest upbringing growing up, too. My parents weren't in the happiest marriage. My uncle was manic depressive schizophrenic, one of them. One of them is like in jail for murder right now. So he was growing up with a lot of, criminal behavior. I think my father wasn't at his best during my youth. Things were abusive. I think our family environment was very mentally and emotionally abusive. Everybody in my family will have a very different experience of that. Can't speak for them. Things eventually got very physically abusive towards me. There were many years of sexual abuse on my end as well. I was sexually abused by a very close family member.
Oh my goodness.
When you go through all this, you are just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be a pity party or even victimize myself because I'm so over that mentality, right? But when you're growing up as a kid and you really just want to go out and play, and you've got all this,
right?
You have no choice but to try to do whatever you need to do to survive that day and hope everything's okay the next morning. I think a lot of my family would identify with that, but that doesn't give you room to really negotiate any sort of identity.
No, it doesn't.
And I realized I never was afforded throughout these experiences a space to say, maybe this is who I am. I was always running away from what I felt wasn't going to serve me. So then my sexuality and my identity was just something else to run away from.
Right.
And it was easier to run away from something because that's what I spent most of my life doing, was just running away from a fight, running away from an argument, running away from somebody who's angry, running away from yourself. Why not? It's just easy, right? I haven't been taught to do it.
And you're used to it.
It's autopilot. You're on autopilot, right?
It's a coping skill, right?
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism, absolutely. So I really didn't have an opportunity or ever sit down and think too deeply. I just always knew that these are the characteristics I have that are not acceptable. I am the eldest son in the family, so I do need to get married. I do need to find a woman to marry. I do need to have kids. That's my worth. That's my value. I want to be accepted. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So if nothing else fit that, it just got thrown to the side. It didn't absorb and then have a moment and then I'm like, okay, I'll shut the door. I just didn't even consider it. It just went off. If it didn't go down this road, it was gone. Little did I know, this road was never meant for me. I was always around that road, right? And I eventually came to that. So, I mean, that's a point in the journey that I don't always identify with when it comes to other LGBTQ members in the community. Like, they've always had many of them, not all, have always had a moment which I've never had. That literally came a few days before I decided to tell my family that I was gay. So it was fast and it was immediate.
But you know what, like you said, like, because of what you were running away from, you didn't have that space to understand yourself. And sometimes when we are uncomfortable with ourselves because of so many reasons, and a huge part, especially in our culture, is family, It's, being like compared to your like siblings, to your cousins, all of those things. Your voice sometimes gets shut down, and then when you are not heard, you don't know how to talk to yourself, so you cannot listen to yourself. So different coping skills come up, and in some cases it's running away from like who you are. In some cases, sometimes it's like abusing, alcohol or drugs, or like, I'm not saying that's your case, but I'm just saying like
Yeah.
there's, different ways that we end up going down the rabbit hole. But I think what you went through was very difficult. I cannot obviously fully relate to it, but I can understand that fear and that suppression that brought you to that point. But I will say, and this may sound, touching on the spiritual journey, is that I feel when people have very good intentions about their life and what they want to do, somehow you have to have that breakdown, have that, oh my God, this is the end, or what's next for me, I'm totally broken moment. But then life shifts, and I mean, you are here and you're one of the superstars, as we all call you and say. So that's what I truly believe.
Yeah, I don't regret any of those experiences because they've made me who I am today, But just like you said, Rashi, there is always that moment of a breakdown. You never reach that sort of spiritual journey because you just flowed into it. You had a really low moment and you had to pull yourself out of that, right? And I think when we come back to the idea of a spiritual journey, you're going to have more low moments. But the thing is, like, you become better and you have the tools and the faculties and the foundations to then bounce back from that even faster, right? So when I talk about, sexuality, anytime that I have to tell somebody that I'm gay brings back those moments, brings some of those feelings, right? Like, this idea of coming out doesn't stop, it continues, right? Especially when you decide to accept yourself and really embrace who you are at a later age, because there are many people who accept that journey and are on it far sooner when they're younger in their formative years, and then they grow into that self of like that sense of identity. But I think for many of us who have had to constantly battle a lot of things that stood against it, you always go back to this sense of discomfort. I always sweat a little, I always shake a little, I always get a little uncomfortable in my body talking about it, because for so many years I was like physically trained to just kind of protect myself when I was being humiliated, or when there was shame that I was facing. It's so funny that I end up in this kind of career because I have stage fright. Like, I find it very difficult to speak in front of people. I do.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
I have to do a talk, even in a group of like 4 or 5 people. Every time I have to go on stage for an event, or you can ask Veronica Childers on Bollywood Boulevard. And I mean, poor girl, I think she always understood that there was a level of anxiety that I was facing. But every time we would get ready to roll, my body would just get so hot and I'd get so nervous. And then pair that with studio lighting, I was just like, So she was always sweet. She never said anything. She never brought attention to it. And I mean, she's one of my greatest friends since we're still in touch. But it doesn't matter what happens, even though I'm actually not nervous in that moment, my body is used to reacting. So it's always now fighting that. So even if I'm so comfortable, I mean, I'm not facing any of that right now because I'm so comfortable, but if I'm doing something and I feel 100% confident, suddenly my body starts reacting a certain way, and then I get really nervous about that. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to start sweating profusely. Like, what do I do? And then that makes it even worse, right? So it's a battle, and that battle, germinates in different ways with different people, right? But there's always something that you're trying to then surpass in order to get through that.
It's like layers. Like all I'm hearing, there's so many layers and the layers get deeper and deeper depending on the circumstance, situation, conversation. Wow. I mean, these are things you can't even fathom or think of outside of when you hear talks about the issues or the conversation, but what the person is actually going through internally, and how much of a toll that actually takes on you.
Yeah. And I do have to say, like I've said coming out myself so many times, I've opened up about this too in a recent blog post on my website and on Instagram.
I read it. I read it, and I almost cried. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was very close to tears because I was just like, oh my God. And it doesn't help that I'm an empath, and it doesn't help that lately my energies are extremely like there. So I'm all about the feels lately, but I like almost cried there. I was just like,
Guys,
oh my
really
God.
quick on that note, we do have to take a quick break, so we're going to do that right now. And we're going to come back to the blog post that we just talked about.
And everybody, welcome back. And we are with Daniel, and this is one of the best conversations that we're having. I'm so excited and so honored to finally have a conversation with him. And right before our break, we've been chatting about your latest blog post on self-acceptance
Yes.
and what that was for you.
Yeah, so just before the break, I was sort of mentioning the phrase coming out. And I used it 100 times myself too. You just can't avoid these things that become so ingrained in your culture. But as I've grown older, I've been trying to move away from using that phrase because it places so much importance on the moment you decide to share yourself with other people, right? By constantly saying coming out, understanding that we're all going to say it ourselves. So, but there is this sort of reinforcement of the importance of what others think, And I think, now that I speak so spiritually, there is a whole journey of self-acceptance that completely gets ignored in that coming out process, right? It's always what gets paired with the word coming, with that phrase. It's like, well, what do your mom say? What do your dad say?
Yeah, of course. It's exactly where my mind goes.
Yeah, what everybody's reaction is. But like, what about what you think about yourself? I mean, you could have spent 20 years, 30 years, 15 years, 5 years in complete agony to come to a point of self-acceptance. Because if you didn't reach that point of self-acceptance, you would have never come out anyways. It doesn't work backwards. So I try to not use that phrase as much. But I'm not saying it as a criticism to you two or myself.
No, of course.
No, for sure.
But really, I just want to constantly describe, as I say it, that it's always about your journey to self first, right? Me coming to terms and having that experience of self-acceptance wasn't just about my sexuality. It was about understanding my weight, being comfortable with the way I walked, the way I talked, and the way I dressed, and who were my friends and who weren't my friends, and which breakups were good, which breakups were bad, being okay with the relationship with my mother, my father, my sister, being okay with the things I like to eat and the things I don't. It was a full-on 360 self-acceptance, That's what it was for me. And because I just accepted it all, it was just one piece of the pie. It was just the last piece that I needed to just put in there.
Right.
It was just smooth sailing from there. And I think that if there is anybody out there who's struggling with their sexuality, I always suggest look at other areas in your life where you can sometimes make improvements. Look at maybe some toxic habits that you could be having. Look at your relationship with your mother, your sister, your brother, your siblings. When you slowly start to work at these foundational things that form who you are and form your most important relationships, you will start to channel energy that can help you understand yourself better. When you speak to your siblings can be some of your most toxic relationships. But if you can find a way to understand that and have a compassionate place and a place of understanding, you will be so surprised at how that experience will reflect back in you deeply. It's never about just what that relationship is with the other person. Ultimately, it will speak and reflect back with how you feel in the relationship you have with yourself, So if that topic of sexuality is really difficult and it's agonizing to tackle, try doing it in a different way, And I know that sounds so magical and mystical and beautiful when I say it, but to me, if I didn't have a good relationship, or if I didn't try to maintain positivity in the people I was speaking to and the experiences that I was having in different areas, I don't think I would have come to a point where I would have allowed myself to be, Not everybody is afforded that opportunity, but it is a mindset. And if you can try to a way to think in abundance rather than lack, which comes back to what we were talking about earlier, anything is possible. Anything and everything is possible. And I absolutely acknowledge that I say this in complete retrospect.
Of course.
it's very difficult. But if I go back and I analyze how I got to that place, these are some of the ways in which I did it.
What factor do you think the ethnic background plays in this type of journey for anybody who's going through it? Because obviously, as a South Asian male, we've talked a little bit about, you know, the mentality of suppression, the mentality of doing what is quote unquote right, you know, pleasing others, that sort of thing. Where does that fit into the journey for you? And based on your experiences and conversations with peers, does that same factor play in other ethnic backgrounds, or do you just find it specifically within the South Asian?
Well, I think, you know, if I, you know, compare some of the notions against homosexuality from the South Asian background to someone coming from an African ethnic background or a European or a Russian, it's often, you know, the same thing. It's
similar.
It's not straight is the way to go, you know, like it's not normal. The differences on what they consider normal is different. And I'll give you an example. Like when I told my mother I was gay, I mean, she just didn't know what that really meant.
Right.
Like, because, and she told me, she goes, growing up, when my parents are from a South Asian diaspora in the Fiji Islands, right?
Right.
And island mentality into that, like, it gets even worse, right? She's like, you know, nobody was really open about this when we were growing up. We just didn't really understand it. We weren't really exposed to it.
Yeah.
And until we moved to Canada, that we realized that there was a gay community, you know? You start realizing there's a gay community, it's different from you, it's not accepted. There's so many other opinions of what people have to say that comes with that. So that gives you an example. They just didn't understand what it was to be gay. So they just naturally ended up knowing that this wasn't right, and they had no idea what the F it was. I was about to swear, I don't know if profanity.
That's okay. That's all right.
Is there a parental advisory statement?
There will be. It's usually because it's Rashi, but we'll put it in general today.
Yeah. And then you think about, like, my mom is a very accepting person, you know?
Right.
Here she is just being trained to think and be a certain way, and so she just went along with it. And I think that's what most of our parents are going through. They're just victims of a culture that's greater than them and things that they've been told that they needed to understand and, you know, sort of express as they grew older. And then I remember walking into a conversation or overhearing a conversation between my father, my mother, and my grandmother. And they thought, you know, I was gay because I had erectile dysfunction. Like, I had bring it up, right? And I was like, you know, then I stormed into that conversation, and I was like, okay, now.
Oh, so this conversation was happening, and you were in
my dad's house, right? And I was kind of listening to it, and I would always kind of peep in because I wanted to understand what they were saying and understanding things that they would not say in front of me because they were too afraid of hurting my feelings or saying something wrong, right? Because they just don't always have the vernacular or the vocabulary to express things in a fully constructed way. So I realized that they thought it was associated with the biological issue. And so I stepped into that conversation. I'm like, okay, no, I can get it up. Thank you. That's not but I mean, that's not what...
That must have been, I mean, that is probably an awkward conversation on its own.
You know, it was so awkward. It was, but I realized I just had to be done, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But I did, you know, take it upon myself to educate and to be vocal about my experience and allow them to ask questions. Now, you know, when I told my dad, he just threatened me, but he hasn't disowned me. It was just his way of dealing with it, but he hasn't spoken to me about my sexuality or he doesn't, it's just not spoken of.
Right.
But I mean, I expected that, so it didn't really bother me. But I was willing to understand, so I said, okay, hey, listen, like, let's talk. You know, we get some stuff on the news, we talk a little bit about it. If something happens with the gay community or there's a pride parade happening, let's talk about it, you know, and we share opinions. And I sort of sometimes point out what she shouldn't be thinking or how we can correct and shape a statement or a thought from what she thinks or what she's been told. And then that's how we've worked. And I mean, she's come to pride parades with me since. She's completely accepting of it. Like, there's no, it's like so normal in my household now. But it would have never been that way if she wasn't willing to participate in our conversation and if I wasn't willing to have a little bit of patience with her. It goes two ways, right?
Of course.
Completely just hold the mantle and be like, you know, I was the one who had this amazing conversation, but she was willing to learn. And and she was open to it. And I had to put myself in a position to understand that, okay, she might say some things that are going to offend me and piss me off because they just don't know how to express themselves or have opinions that are just, I don't agree with. And I had to just kind of put myself in a place where I was comfortable being uncomfortable in these conversations and allow her to say and express without being offended and use it as an opportunity to educate, and then in that process, learn more about my mother and learn more about where these blockages of acceptance are coming from.
I think that's really important what you just said, and I don't mean to cut you off. That's such an important piece that you mentioned right there, and you said it in various different forms throughout your conversation here, is learn to understand who your mom is and how she thinks. Because, you've said it a couple of times, like they grew up under a different guise, under a different environment, different thought process. So to understand and accept that this is a normal situation and a normal way to live and be is leaps and bounds for them, right?
Yes.
It's leaps and bounds. So as much as you need them to understand you, and this goes beyond just parents, it's siblings, it's family members, it's cousins, it's friends, it's the community at large, and some people are obviously they're more accepting a little bit easier, but to have someone understand your perspective or your thought has, in their eyes, also changed, because up until a certain point to them, this wasn't what your life was about. So now you're being transparent about your life, both to yourself and to them, and what's important to you. They have to accept it, and that's part of your journey. But you have to also accept and understand who they are and the time it's going to take for them to adapt to this. For them.
No, you're right, because when I go back at it, I think I had an understanding that, saying and sharing that I was gay wasn't going to be the end all and be
Of course.
Picking up everybody's experience. It's going to have everybody question moments with me from the past. What's true? What's not? Who are you?
Yes.
What about this experience? What about that experience? What about when you like that girl? What about, this? Like, what about when people said this? Like, it shakes up everybody.
Yeah, I mean, we want to sometimes change small things in our life, and if there's people around that are dependent on that, those small things become large, massive conversations. So this is, a life-altering conversation. So it's naturally going to take time and acceptance and multiple conversations, multiple dialogues, multiple, being upset and being happy and crying and feeling anger and frustration and all those emotions. It's gonna happen, and it probably still does happen in certain circumstances. Maybe not to the
It will continue to. I'm not in a serious relationship yet, and I haven't really brought anybody home yet. Understanding that it is very different for my family.
Of course.
Brought them to a point where, we understand what the gay culture is. They celebrate that with me. But I also understand that, when things get serious with somebody and it's now time to take it to the next level, that's
different.
Like that conversation back into
it's going to happen again. Yes.
Things are going to change. And, suddenly somebody else is going to be involved in that experience too,
Yes.
And, my boyfriend, my husband, whoever he's going to be at that time, I have to be sensitive about how he's going to feel, because it will trigger things in his experience.
Yes.
The lack of acceptance or the celebration or the acceptance create emotions in his situation. And I don't know what his situation is going to be, because Prince Charming has not stepped into the picture yet. I don't know what his situation is going to be, right?
Yeah.
And you and I, one of the key things here is what I'm hearing is that, especially with your mom, she was making the effort to learn and understand. And I think that's such a huge thing, because one of the things I've noticed, especially in our culture, is that we say, oh, because our parents are like this, or they're from this generation, why bother? They won't understand. And then that barrier comes in where they have one mindset and you have another, and somehow we can't have those conversations. But and to be fair, for the longest time I used to always think that way too. But then in my mind I'm like, if parents and aunts and uncles, if they can forward on WhatsApp, if they can go on YouTube, if they can start their kids and know who are they with, they can definitely start taking the effort to understand things like what does it mean to be gay? What are the changes? How's the world evolving? And I think, like you said, those conversations start at home. They're very difficult, but it also says a lot when, and especially like in your case, your mom was making so much efforts to start understanding you and what that is. So that's also like something that I think we always gloss over, but I feel it's a huge component in our lives, really.
Yeah. And, the reason why I mentioned it is because, she wasn't standing there being like, okay, I want to learn about you, right? Like, she was going to ignore it if I let her. But I knew enough that when I pressed and challenged, that there was some curiosity and a need to understand. But I had to really pay attention to the things that she was saying and how she was working, to understand her as a woman in this experience, right?
Yeah.
As a person. And I think that's a level of compassion and sensitivity I would ask any of us to have with our parents, right? Not just if you're gay or straight, interracial marriage. Our South Asian parents have problems with everything that we do.
Yes, exactly.
Let's just be honest. Like, if you're eating at night, if you're not eating, like, they just have a problem with
Everything. It doesn't matter what it is.
So when you are approaching them, you're gonna have to really sort of push past some of this discomfort that you feel when they're initially start talking to you, and stick at it and be persistent and be consistent and get it to a place where it's gonna go to a conversation. I had to do that. I had to really sort of step back and say, okay, this father and this mother are just a man and a woman in a situation where now everything they know about themselves and what they thought they were going to pass down is changing, and it's being completely challenged, right? And I'm having the same experience when they're coming at me with their opinions too. Like, my entire existence is being challenged, right? So it's not, you can't do a tit for tat sort of situation, right? We're not going to go to war. It's the same experience I'm having, just in a different context, right? So you kind of just have to move past that. And, when I talk about my relationship with my father, he hasn't disowned me, wants to make sure that I'm doing my best to lose weight and that I'm trying to be healthy. He's always trying to make an effort to understand. He just, in his entire life, hasn't been able to deal with emotions properly, as I think most South Asian men his generation, and some today, sadly, are told not allowed to feel. They just have to do and, associate your pride in what people can see, And I think that's what was crumbling for him, is a sense of pride. Like, he wasn't going to have this son that he thought he was going to have, the son what he was expecting him to have. And he has to deal with that. And he's not able to communicate. And I just had to make peace with that. If I didn't make peace with it and I was going to be angry and bitter about it, I probably wouldn't even have the conversations that I do with him, we do have a bit of a strenuous relationship for other factors, like I've mentioned, throughout my life, but we still talk. And I wouldn't have that if I decided to be offended and angry. Oh, he doesn't accept me, then, that's the end of the world. That's bull. I can get past that. I'm not uncomfortable being in front of him. I know who I am, and I'm at this point because it doesn't matter what people think anyways, right? And don't get to it. Don't give a damn type mentality.
Yeah, and I think that's something, when you start accepting yourself in any level, and especially when you truly start owning who you are, that whole I don't give a fuck mentality has to come in, because like you
see, Daniel, this is where the explicit language,
I noticed.
It's gonna show up.
I love it.
It's gonna show up. So it is what it is.
I do get into trouble when I swear. I've gotten the.
She's gotten better.
But but when you are truly yourself, what happens is your vibrations change. So that also creates conflict with the same people around you, because they can understand why you are at such a peace with yourself, and despite you having the same struggles sometimes, same thing and it's, when I say having the same struggles, sometimes it's the same things, like getting nervous on going on a date, or why can't I find someone, like the basic everyday life things that we all face, but we just handle it at a more peaceful, confident manner. And then the people around us, they don't know how to accept you, and then you do not vibe with them, and then this whole conflict, a whole friction happens. So, and I'm not asking how do you deal with that, but do you feel that when when you have incorporated the art of forgiveness and compassion, which we were talking about earlier, how big of a role has that practice played? Because people think it's just saying, oh, like, I forgive you and we're done and we move on, but it's such a deeper practice to that. And how has that, maybe helped, even not only with your family and you coming out, but even, I should say, like going from media into PR, that must have been a huge transition for you as well. So how did all of this come together?
So before coming to the media and PR transition, I'm glad that you said forgiveness, because I've really sort of only spoken about compassion right now. But once you start feeling compassionate and you start moving through a lens and a space of love, you can reach forgiveness very easily. And I think, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I was very strong in how I chose to come out, and tell my family that I was gay, because I understood that I needed to forgive certain parts of who I was and the mistakes that I had made, and come to a point and forgive people for the things that they may have said that could have hurt me, and understand that we were all just on a journey. I was just now in a new phase of my journey. It's not better than anybody else's journey, but I'm just in a different place right now.
Yeah.
And shortly after I told my family that I was gay, I did have a one-on-one conversation with both my mother and my father in the same room. And I told them that I forgave them. And of course, my dad didn't really understand.
Wait, what are you talking about? Forgive me for what?
He didn't really get it.
What did I do? What did I do?
Yeah. And he was quiet and he listened. And my mother participated in the conversation, but I had to go back to a lot of things from my past that I held against them for the lack of care, for the lack of protection, or I felt they should have been taking care of me. And I mean, we grow up everybody grows up putting their parents on a pedestal, that they should provide and take care of certain things for you, because you just don't have the faculties and tools and the maturity to do it yourself. And I just realized that I had held so much bitterness and resentment towards them. And so I just said, I forgive you guys. And since then, I haven't, I've kind of let go of so much. I think I had to come to a point and understand that they were a man and a woman who did the best they could given what they had at that time. And yes, what they said and did could have hurt me. Yes, there were some negative experiences. But if I kept myself there, I would have never grown into who I am. It would probably still be there. And so I had to kind of see them as people. And I think that's a transition that a lot of us don't make as adults, that we constantly hold our parents accountable to the mistakes and the decisions they made that hurt you, not transitioning out of that thought and saying that, okay, they're just a man and a woman who tried their best, at times caught in situations that they did not expect to be in, a divorce looming over their heads, and oh my God, heaven forbid, divorce, right? That's so taboo too.
Of course.
Just trying to live their lives for everybody else, and that, when I chose to live my life for myself and not them, they're going to have a hard time understanding that, because they sacrificed who they were to live for everybody else, and a lot of people don't transition to that. I highly, highly encourage everybody to step back and just look at their parents as people, or whoever are parental figures to them as people, because when you you start understanding and you have more love and be like, oh my God, or sometimes you end up realizing you're in the same situation they were in.
Right.
And it allows you to have compassion and forgiveness. And then when you start forgiving people, you start letting go,
Yes.
And you start accepting it's like shedding your skin like a snake. Like the minute you start feeling compassion for others and trying to understand how they've entered in the same situation that you were in that hurt you, understand what brought them to that place, you start shedding these layers and the skin of that old you, and you start embodying like a newer skin for yourself, But let me tell you, you have to constantly go back to that place of compassion and forgiveness, because there are some people who try me constantly. And oh my God, it's okay.
You're a human being. Your buttons get pushed.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of people, Rashi, you'll understand this too. Like when you start really practicing spirituality, they just think you don't feel anything negative. Like everything just slides off your back. It's like, no, you get so angry that you have to and work yourself to come back here. That process may be faster, because you know exactly what to do to bring yourself back to somewhere positive. But in order to be spiritual and to constantly be enlightened and elevate yourself and ascend further in your journey as a human, you experience lows constantly.
You experience triggers constantly.
Yes.
You experience changes. I feel sometimes you may experience more rejection than acceptance constantly, but it's, like you said, you're shedding those layers, but you just now come to a point where you know how to deal with it. Like sometimes going back to love and compassion and being able to forgive, these are elements that are almost everyday practices. Like we may take a bit of break if like things are calm for a while, but again, you go back to that, okay, I need to truly understand the situation and practice these 3 steps, which is ever changing in our lives, I think. It's constant work all the time.
All the time. It's every day.
Daniel, how did you shift that energy back into the success that you're experiencing now, both personally and in your career? Because this is a lot to handle for any individual. The family obviously, but even for you as an individual, so it's a lot to handle. But shifting that energy and using it for good is I don't want to call it a skill, but it's not easy. So how did you find that journey, or how did you navigate yourself to do that? Because you're very successful in your career. You have a very flourishing network of peers in both industries, media and PR. Obviously you're very well known and very well liked. So how did you shift your energy to build into that positivity and to build your career?
I think, well, first of all, had I never come to the point where I accepted that I was gay and kind of put that out there, I would have never attracted the opportunities I did. All
right.
That came to me after. I met Veronica Chael back at the end of 2011. So I was really just like freshly gay for like a year and a bit.
Freshly gay. That's we've just coined a new term.
Hashtag freshly gay.
I don't think I would have ever met Veronica if I was not vibing in that place that I was in.
Right.
Opportunities that came, she was really the one who opened that door for me. And she saw an opportunity and she saw potential and she really wanted to support that and she helped foster that. And I don't think I would have ever met her if I was that negative, person
prior to, yeah.
It would have never happened. But shortly after, when the whole TV thing started coming, and Veronica was like, okay, we're going to start doing this regularly, and I had to really understand that, okay, you're going to be out there now. So
yeah.
You're gay. You need to be.
You own it.
I never told Veronica this, but I had to have a conversation with myself, and I was like, okay, you're gay. It's going to be out there. There's no going back.
Yeah.
It's going to be there on national television. Everyone's going to know. If there's an aunt or uncle out there who doesn't know, they're going to know.
They know. Now they know.
And I said to myself, first of all, they'll know from all the obvious signs. But 2, I'm going to go into this being unapologetically myself. I'm not going to try to pretend to be anything. And I want to sort of bash down that door, and I want to just go in there with abandon. And that's the space I want to be in. I do not want to be in a space again where I'm tiptoeing around, or I shouldn't be this and I shouldn't be that. And I have to say, like, Omni Television and City TV at that time, like, they were accepting of it. For like a very conservative South Asian show that wasn't really broadcasting a lot that didn't attribute to those standard South Asian values, they were very accepting of that. And obviously, Veronica was the one who sort of steered that show into a new direction and started bringing in someone who was gay. Like, let's show that person, Talk about controversial issues. That was something she wanted to do, and she asked me to be a part of that. So they were welcoming too. Like, I didn't have a difficult time, but personally, I had to constantly remind myself not to feel nervous, understand that, okay, I'm going to be judged a little. It's okay. I only ever got love, and I had to constantly keep myself thinking like that in that space. Like, listen, you're going to start sweating. You're going to get nervous before the shot. But listen, it's about just being who you are. And that's all I wanted to do. I wasn't trying to be a journalist. I was given an opportunity to be who I was.
Who you were.
And Bollywood was a passion, and I always knew the tea. when it came to B-Town. I just always knew it, right? So I'm like, so I'm having fun. Like this is, I know this is a job, and there was a lot that went into it that made it stressful on a job, but I'm being given an opportunity to be myself, so I need to be 100%. And that's how I kept myself flowing in that space.
I'm gonna stop you there. We're gonna take a quick break.
Sure.
And then we're gonna come right back and continue on this journey. And we are back. So, Jeremy, before the break, you're diving into your work experience, being on Omni, being on a South Asian show that was accepting of who you were and embracing it. You know, it created for a lot of great conversations, a lot of great journalism. Where did that lead you to once that sort of took off and sort of dove you into the career of media and being on television?
Well, you know, once I started being myself, obviously being on national television, it brought other opportunities, hosting gigs, working for different media outlets, traveling. It brought a lot. It brought so much. I can't even, interview opportunities. It just brought a lot. It gave me a lot of credibility, and it gave me a platform to speak about my story, and
yes.
Since then, there are so many more open South Asian voices coming from the LGBTQ community. But in comparison, we're still a small number compared to the majority. So, and then, naturally, when Canadian media just broadcast television just wasn't in a very abundant space, I made that transition to PR. Then I had to relearn a lot of skills. Even though it was in the media space, you're putting yourself out there in a different way. From newsrooms and television sets to meeting rooms and Zoom calls and brand presentations and events. It was a new world, but I was still putting myself out there. But again, I had to feel comfortable in what I had to offer and be comfortable in the skin that I was in and be okay to continue learning. And it's okay. I'm learning every day, Now that we're even in COVID, we're relearning how to work and be productive, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
I understood it as a lesson. I also understand that, I don't know how far PR is going to take me or how long it will last because I can never predict the future. But PR has been ever changing. It has been ever evolving. I have a very short attention span. So, there's something new and different in PR every day. So it serves me very well. And I think I just kind of have to understand that I'm the student of life. And because I adopt that student mentality, I'm able to transition through all, understanding that, okay, there are going to be things that I need to learn. There are going to be hurdles to overcome. There'll be some celebrations and accolades, and they are all going to go hand in hand into this experience, and I'm going to have to make the best of it as I can. And then, you take those, move it into the next. Learn a bunch of these, take them, put it into the next, right? Mm-hmm. So you never bake a cake one way. It's always going to be a little different each time. So I think that's the type of mentality I have.
I love your examples, because I think your examples just really simplify what your emotions are.
It always comes back to food, by the way.
Okay, there you go. Food is great. I'm planning on having a whole bunch of dessert after this, so based on this conversation alone.
Yes.
So just to clarify for our listeners, what type of PR work do you do?
So I work for a company. I'm the vice president of Langton Communications, and we are mainly a beauty lifestyle firm, working all across Canada. And we generally work with pretty big beauty brands. We work with GHD, which is a hair tool brand that's quite popular. We work with OPI nail lacquers, hair brands like Joico, skincare brands, beauty, whatever you name it, grooming. That's my kind of space. Because I'm a beauty junkie, so it's a perfect space. Get a lot of product. That's why
product is great.
It's your game.
It's the all aligned, right?
Yeah.
It's what you love. There you go.
Yeah.
So you have a blog, which was originally it was a digital series, but now it's more of a blog, which is Date with Daniel.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that, and also, and the reason I'm touching into that right now is there's a lot of focus on skincare on your blog.
Yeah.
Which is also a focus in your PR world. So tell us a little bit about Date with Daniel, what that whole thing is about, and where skincare fits in. Sort of.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Date with Daniel was a sort of
I
platform.
love the name, by the way. It's such a cool name.
Thank you. Thank you. It was kind of like my coffee with current sort of spin. You know?
Right.
But it was a very different context. Like date was meant to be like an intimate moment with me.
I just want to really quickly say that I think your name flows better. Date with Daniel flows better than Coffee with Kern. I'm just putting that out there.
Thank you.
If Kern's listening, I apologize, man. Like, it's no disrespect. I like what you do, but Date with Daniel just works.
Yes. And I know I loved it. And the idea is that some people think it's a dating show, and it's not. And Date with Daniel really is just an intimate moment shared where we talk about whatever it is that we're connecting on, whether it's whether it's something light and fluffy, whether it's skincare. It's just a moment where we get to know each other through a certain vessel or a certain conversation. So that's the idea. I started it as like a digital YouTube series. Trying to get
I remember that.
Yeah, because, I was just coming off of the TV thing there. And that's what I knew, that's what I loved, and I thought I'd give it a try. Digital, man, those YouTubers, I have a lot of respect because that's a lot of work. Hard stuff to maintain. I mean, financially, if you want to do it properly, then there's money you need to put into it. The biggest investment that I just didn't have enough of was time to keep that going. And then, the Bollywood opportunities did kind of dry up in Toronto, to be quite honest with you, in Canada. Like, there wasn't just as much as there was there then. But, then I started to slowly transition into PR, and then I just got really busy, with that full-time career. And really, I'll come back to a point. I was really trying to run away from PR for a very long time. So actually, I was trying to maintain Date with Daniel at that time that I had started working full-time at Langton Communications, and it was becoming a real struggle. And I had this sort of conversation with myself. I'm like, okay, is it media or PR? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I kind of took on PR because I felt like it was going to keep me in and I'm being 100% honest here.
Of course.
It was going to help keep me in the media space while I tried to
navigate
broadcast and navigate my way back. But then there was just so much opportunity. And then the woman who owns our agency, who was my boss, her name is Donnelly Langton, she had so much faith in me, and she had so much, she saw so much potential in, working towards like a bigger position, eventually becoming vice president and partner in the agency now too.
Awesome.
She saw a future there because she saw that potential, and I was just so busy trying to just be like, okay, this is temporary, we'll go back to TV. And then eventually, I'm like, you know what? There's nothing new happening there. People are still continuing to lose their jobs in broadcast, but there's so much abundance coming to me.
So much opportunity, yeah.
I'm going to completely surrender to this abundance and just welcome it. And then that's when I'm like, okay, I'll just put Date with Daniel on hold for now. And I started doing my PR thing. And then I was having a conversation with one of my friends, Meg Sethi, who's also, a very popular publicist in Toronto, Canada, actually. And she encouraged me to make it an online website just because it was easier for me to tap into that Date with Daniel energy. It was going to be easier to maintain. And it took me a while because I felt so much pressure coming from TV that things needed to look and be a certain way. Like, it needed to be polished. It needed to be professionally shot and packaged. And I just couldn't work out of that mentality until COVID hit. And then everybody's like doing Zoom calls in their pajamas, or something like running on them. I'm like, no one gives a shit right now on how this content is produced. They just want content. And I literally got a friend to help me design that site in 2 weeks, and it was out. I said, let's just make it as aesthetically pleasing as it can be to my taste. The idea is to get it out, start writing, and just be candid and casual and honest with everybody. So COVID,
it's a very well put together site. I will tell you that.
Oh, thank you. COVID, really, the blessings of COVID, it came from my reflection and just having enough time. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And I'm just going to be as authentic as possible. And then that's how I started this new iteration of Date with Daniel, which I'm hoping to explore it in video components and many other ways as time goes on. But I decided to bring, my tagline is Sass, Spirit, and Spice. And
I love that.
A bit of my Bollywood, there's a lot of my spirit work. And
that's basically you. Like that's I don't think of 3 words to describe you. That's it.
And skincare. Skincare has always been a part of my game. Always. To me, my skincare arsenal are my accessories. They're the accessories I always have with me. I always felt that, having a good complexion, having a bright complexion, having a clear complexion with good skincare was my way of putting my best
As we all look in the cameras to make sure we look okay.
It was all my way of putting my best foot and face forward, you know? I felt good in my skin. It really was about feeling good in your skin, you know? I like to exfoliate and, you know, use your sunscreen. These are all important things for me. But also, one of my first part-time jobs was at Shoppers Drug Mart. And I worked at the skincare counter. I was like the only guy there. But there was a manager, her name was Tanya Salerno. She had so much faith in me. You know, I was out there earning my commission, learning from these brands, and just loving my skincare and putting that knowledge and that information out there. And I'd say understanding brands, learning about skincare, learning about what went into creating skincare and how it helped me feel good, continued with that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised I ended up back in beauty, to be completely honest with you. I'm not surprised at all. Sometimes it's hard to even think that I'm working, just because it comes so naturally to me.
Yeah.
So it's hard to shut off, to be honest. But, you know, that's the PR and skincare world for me right now.
Your story is incredible.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's so key, right? Like what you do doesn't feel like work. It's love. It's basically you're doing your passion every single day. And that's what life technically should be about. The fact that you've come to a point where you don't feel like you're going to work, like you're excited. And you know, when you said that you were running away from PR, but PR still found you,
Yeah.
it's one of those things when we run away from something or when we feel like this is not for me, or we just resist it for whatever reason. I truly believe that if it's yours, if it's meant for you, it's gonna push through and find
Absolutely.
you, right? So
Yeah. And it's funny how it comes back to you. Sometimes you may not think it's coming back to you, but it actually did, you know, like that was that moment. So
it's that energy, yeah.
Yeah, it's that energy, and it's very subtle. You know, I often realize things in hindsight, because I think one of the biggest challenges I had in media especially was being present. Like, I had the opportunity to interview one of my favorite, like
I know it's coming.
Mind Feminines, Madhuri Dixit. Like, I had
her smile, oh my god, I love her.
And ask me if I remember that moment. No.
Yeah.
I have a photo of it. I can go back and show you video footage of it. But do I remember that moment being in it? Absolutely not. I was so busy running to the next interview.
Mm-hmm.
I was so busy just making sure I had the content I did, you know, that it really didn't. I I always come back to that example, because, you know, if I'm fortunate enough, I'll have another opportunity to meet her and have face-to-face time. But I had it at that one time, and I just couldn't allow myself to be present enough to enjoy that.
Because then you were like in like, I got Madhu Dixit to sit down with me. Like, I got to focus and make this the best I can. You weren't thinking about, let me enjoy this.
Yeah. Actually, I wasn't even thinking like that. I was like, I was there to get the bite while she was there. Right? So I just quickly got the bite, just whatever came out of my mouth, and then it was just done.
And we've had some amazing conversations and written up on some amazing people too. Like, Madhu's obviously this topper, Priyanka Chopra, which is another one of Rashi's favorites.
She is my favorite. I'm not gonna lie. She's actually a huge favorite of mine.
She's on this topper.
She's on my vision board, by the way, guys. Sorry, she's actually a big picture of hers on my vision board. It's my dream to do a shoot for her. Like, that's my vision board right there. That's all I care about right now.
Oh, just keep putting it there. It'll happen.
It's gonna happen. 100%. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Go on.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So you've had these great opportunities, and these are all life experiences, and they probably, like, how does that transition to you in terms of A, successes, and B, into where you want to go now, like in terms of your life and career?
You know, it's so interesting you asked that, because the reason why I liked interviewing people was because I'd always walk away with something new.
Absolutely.
I do have to say, I was very fortunate, you know, because I did have a few years at Anoki Media, right, where I was working with and that's where a lot of my opportunities had come through, right, because of the one-on-one interviews, and I had opportunities through Omni prior to that too. I think I was more the focus when it came to Omni, and then I had the opportunity to actually meet more people through Anoki. But what Raj never controlled what I was saying or what I was doing. She just allowed me to she allowed you to be you. Yeah, she never tried to formulate my questions. She never tried to come up with a storyboard with me. She allowed me to do what I needed to do. So I was able to get what I needed from those interviews. I always walked away with a piece. Something new to learn, something that elevated me, something that helped me with my journey, my story, a thought, a perspective, a framework. I always loved these type of things, right? And I liked that, she allowed me the opportunity to really discover that person in a way that I was comfortable doing. So that's the reason why I liked that stuff. And that's what sort of helped me funnel that all into like Date with Daniel. It's like, I kind of like connecting with people. It's just now I've sort of broadened the connectors. It's not just Bollywood, it's just life. It could be skincare, it could be sunscreen, like whatever it is, let's just like bond. And like we've had so many points here in this conversation. Of course. I really wanted that platform to really, I want the Date with Daniel platform to just continue allowing me to selfishly learn from the experiences and the conversations that I'm having, because that's how I'll maintain that.
And why not? Why not? I mean, you're doing these things to learn. You're doing these things to meet people. If you're not taking away from it, what good is it doing you? Lot?
Yeah, and just sort of, allowing myself again to be a student, and learn from other people. I like being the vessel through which a lot can be communicated, and in the process, learning myself. I'm not, when I get onto my Instagram feed and I talk about the lunar cycles, I'm not an astrologer. I'm not trying to be a I'm literally learning it with you, and then I'm showing you the book I'm learning it from, so you can use that resource and then teach me something too. That's the sort of perspective I have on it, right? I'm not trying to be an expert in that sense. When it comes to skincare, like I didn't go into the lab and create this moisturizer, So I'm just using it in the best way that I know how, with the knowledge that I have available to me, and that I love connecting with other people who use it or know how to use it or who have expert knowledge. I like to just be the vessel through that communication. I'm lucky that what I'm choosing to share, people are finding interesting,
Very interesting. Like I'm learning a lot in this conversation that I didn't know about you.
Thank you. But I'm hoping that eventually it becomes a two-way conversation.
Absolutely.
And I more ideas to explore on the blog too, right? I'd love to expand it to multiple voices. I don't want it to just be mine.
Right.
To build it where it could be a collection of stories. I'm actually going to be starting that soon with some LGBTQ profiles on the website.
Awesome.
And allow.
Oh, that's so amazing.
Create a space for voices and profiles and people to be showcased that doesn't necessarily have my stamp on it, just that is on my.
Of course.
Yeah. So I'm trying to create that sort of element.
Like-minded or even non-like-minded collaborations are important just to get perspective on different ways of thinking, and also to build into different communities so that your voice and the people's voice that you're providing get heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I'm gonna switch gears for a second here because we're gonna be coming to a close really soon. But there is a topic that I really wanted to get into with you, and I was hoping to spend some more time.
Yeah,
dude, it doesn't matter what background you are, where you come from, whatever. You have some incredible, impeccable fashion sense, and I don't know where it comes from, but I've always wanted to have this conversation with you because every time I see you, it's like it's on point. Like there's never a time I've been like, hey, you know what? I don't know what Daniel's thinking with that outfit because I've never thought that. It's always been like, that's incredible. How did that happen? Where did he get it?
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about your fashion sense and sort of what inspires you. What brings it together?
I've never really considered myself a fashionable person. I mean,
oh my goodness,
I would say stylish because I really
I like that word better.
Yeah. It's I think both. I mean, it's both for me.
It's because to me, when I say fashionable, like it's just knowing what's hot and what to wear and what's in season. And while I do know a lot of that stuff for the beauty and the fashion world, I've never considered myself to kind of run in that space. Not that it's a bad thing. I've just, Rashi, you're gonna hate me for this. I hate fashion shows. Like they're so boring.
I love doing those. I love producing fashion shows.
So I've never.
I feel like you guys need to have an off-camera conversation about that.
Yeah, we do.
I just can't. So I've never really been drawn to what's happening now. I mean, sometimes there could be a color that's hot or something, but I just wear what I feel comfortable in. And I think, when I was growing up, I was constantly told that, like, I always gravitated towards pink, but I was always told it was a girl's color. Like, I couldn't or shouldn't love it. I opened up about that soon on a blog post as well.
Very nice.
I really embraced that color in my adulthood because it's me. You know, when you go, I'm making it all pink and pretty because that's who I am. That's the color that I resonate with. That's the one that makes my heart sing. It comes into my clothes. It comes into my glasses. Like there's always an element. It's who I am. So I always try to really bring that into what I'm wearing, an element of me. I never want to feel like I'm not who I am, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind stepping into that when it comes to, you know, doing something for work, but I'd love to step in and out of it. What I'm about, it needs to be comfortable, it needs to be me, and I need to be comfortable wearing it. So that's where you get a lot of the pinks and a lot of the bright colors. I do have a fascination for leopard. Oh Lord, I'm wearing pink and some leopard here.
But it's flowing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love leopard. And that fascination really started with my love for Shania Twain. Because, you know,
I was going to ask you about that too.
And then that song that Don't Impress Me Much. Like, it's just, I've always gravitated to various different shades and patterns of it, but I love leopard. So those are the two things that I would say. And black, pink, and leopard.
I might be asking you a secret here because you get a lot of pieces that are very unique and that, you know, if I walked into a mall, I'm not going to find. So we're like, maybe you don't have to divulge if it's like a, you know, a secret to you, all the power, because you have amazing choices. Where do you get your stuff, man? Like, where do you find all these amazing pieces?
They're custom.
Okay, that makes sense.
You can't find them, right?
There you go.
But
That's the secret.
I didn't, you know what, I never went the custom route because I wanted to have that level of, like, you know, exclusivity. I went because I had to. I was a larger size. I could not find things in stores to fit me. It was difficult to go and find sponsors who could, you know, fit my type. I was always heavier set. I was always bigger. You know, I always struggled with my weight, you know, up and down. There's only few times that I think I was able to wear something off the rack when it came to my media career. So I had to go to custom made. But, you know, I always turn a negative into a positive. I had to go the custom route, but I said, you know what? Okay, so what's the biggest, boldest pattern that you have? Like, I'm just gonna go all the way.
Yeah.
And then I met this guy named Pillai, you know, and he's got this custom wear company called Monsieur Pillai, and so he was really great.
I think I actually know who you're talking about. I think I've met him. Yeah, he follows me and I follow him. Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
He's
great.
Yeah.
Super great.
He never argued with me on my patterns, and that's who I've been going to and getting things custom made. I started with a necessity, but then it turned into something.
Yeah, then you build.
A staple, yeah. And then, you know, every once in a while, you know, when I got back to a size that allowed me to go to a store and fit certain things, I would still go back and get something custom made because I wanted to explore like another leopard. I got a lot of leopard custom. I want to explore another leopard or another shade of pink, or, you know, I have this idea, let's do this instead. So the custom route really allowed for a lot of creativity and a lot of personalization. But I think the inspo really it's just what I like. You know, I gravitate towards things that have a more deeper meaning to me. You know, like the color pink was symbolic to my journey. So I really love to embrace that. And I just make it Daniel. I think Rashi, you would agree too. That's the best style tip. Just make it you.
I love it.
Yeah, own it. Just be you.
And you own it. Like, nobody is gonna think about which designer that is or which runway collection that's from. You know, I think runway collections are just a way for you to gauge and measure what could be popular at a certain time, right?
You know, to that point, and I will share this, and I don't normally say this. Some of the best compliments I've got when I've walked into a party or things like that has been non-designer wear. It's just been stuff that I own. A lot of it might have some sequences and hats, but I just own it, just wear it and go. And they're non-designer stuff. They're literally like things you'll find in a mall. It's just like you said, you bring your personality into it, right? So that's, I think, the biggest style tip. Yeah.
And how you put it together, I think you
absolutely, yeah.
It's how you put it together, you know?
Absolutely. And and Daniel, like, to your credit, you definitely have an eye for that and how to take pieces and make them pop. So again, kudos to your fashionist. Daniel, this has been amazing.
Also, starting to explore
please.
Options. That's the other style piece that I've been doing is eyewear. You know?
Yes.
I've noticed that on your
those glasses are awesome.
Have like different ones, yes.
Yeah. I go to the optical boutique in BC. You know, they've been great. They're my staple with my eyewear, only because they just get the funkiest looking stuff. So yeah, you just get creative, you know. Sometimes
You gotta find yourself in your clothes.
yeah, like because I struggled so much to find things that could fit me, I went to other things that could express my personality.
Of course.
I was missing out. I went to rings, you know, I went to glasses. You saw scarves. You know, remember I had that scarf phase too, so it's coming back.
Accessories are an incredible way to express especially like if you're trying to work a simple piece. Accessories can really pop that whole outfit without even doing much. And sometimes it's simple accessories that are not over the top even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
They go a long way.
Yeah.
So Daniel, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation. Like, you know, I'll let Rashi share her thoughts too. I'm just so impressed by this conversation. Yeah, there's so much learning from this conversation, just on perspective. Your perspective on, and just based on your experiences that you've shared with us today, has taught me a lot just on how to view things. I mean, I find myself to be a fairly positive person as much as possible. You know, I look at you know, the common phrase glass half full. I'm always trying to find the opportunity in a situation, the silver lining, all that kind of good stuff. But even some of the things you said went over and above that and beyond. And so for me, like, this is a podcast I would actually sit down and listen to over and over, because there's things in there that I can take away and apply in the day-to-day. So thank you again for being so open and honest with us and sharing some of those amazing insights.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and to, you know, Sadar's point, I think this is one of the first few episodes I'm also taking in and thinking what I have to say, just because, I mean, you have inspired us in so many ways, and, you know, everything that you've said about your journey. Like, I was having one of those days where I was having a bit of a low day as well, and then I'm hearing you and I'm just like, yeah, I can apply this and I can just turn everything around. And how you know, talk about, I think what is the biggest takeaway here is being, like, always being a student and always learning. And I think that changes so much for you as a person, for like things around you. So, you know, like, for everyone who's listening, key things here is, whether you are struggling, you know, in terms of coming, like, whether it's your sexuality, whether it's what you want to do, whether it's bringing home someone that you think your parents are not going to accept, I think the first key is to own yourself. Things will shift and change. And then, you know, really start practicing the art of love, compassion, and forgiveness. And I can just tell from these past 6 months, it's changed my life. It's only been 6 months. There's a lot more. So I can just imagine, you know, what more shifts it can bring. So Daniel, thank you. This was such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm like so honored to like have you with us today. So thank you again so much.
Oh my God, guys, like, thank you. I think I also have to express my gratitude too, because as I said earlier, I never take opportunities like this for granted. When, you know, to be given platforms like this to speak on is great, but then I also learn a lot about myself too. You know, I think one of the things about this spiritual journey is that you have to constantly reevaluate where you're at in your life and understand the fruits of your labor, have gratitude for the things that have helped continue your growth, and then understand the learning lessons that you've had too, right? And this has been a very complete conversation. You know, every once in a while it's like a rushed 10 minutes or 5 minutes, and pack as much as you can in that time. To have this sort of holistic view and being given the opportunity to express this, for me, has been amazing. And so I'm very grateful for that too. And I'm grateful that you guys are doing something like this, because, you know, prior to this conversation, I've really been at a place where I'm now looking at all my past experiences and how, you know, they've come to the start of this decade for me, and how I'm going to propel myself for the next 10 years. You know, like, I've just been like freshly gay for 10 years, and now it's time to remain freshly gay.
Hashtag freshly gay.
Hashtag freshly
I don't want to get stale at this, right?
So, no.
Yeah.
I don't want to get stale. That's awesome.
So opportunities like this, conversations like this with people who come to the table with such insight and understanding, I have gratitude for that. So thank you very much, both of you.
Daniel, please drop your socials, your website. Where can people find you online, and what's the website for Date with Daniel? We'll put it in the description, but just so that those who are listening.
So the blog is datewithdaniel.com, and I also have a personal website, which is simply danielpillai.com. And then my socials are easy. Instagram is obviously the main one. So it's Daniel.Pillai. That's Pillai. Twitter, occasional appearance every once in a while. Daniel_Pillai. And then, I'm still up to date with the Facebook family, and that Daniel Pillai Official. That is an actual page there, Daniel Pillai Official.
So, but if they go to your Instagram or website, can they find links to everything?
Yes, they can find links to everything. So honestly, drop me a DM. I love personal conversations. Don't just make it a comment. Get into the DMs, talk.
Have a conversation. We'll drop.
That's gonna happen. That's definitely gonna happen.
So as soon as Rashi gets off this call, she's messaging you. So we'll drop all your credentials at on the description so people can grab them.
Thank you.
And again, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And so for our listeners, thank you again. You've been listening to Daniel Pillai, aka Date with Daniel. Do check him out on the socials. Have a conversation with him. That's what he's here for. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Hey guys, thank you for watching that podcast or that video. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more of us and see some of our behind the scenes stuff, subscribe below.
Yes, hit that little red button thingy that's over there and hit subscribe and keep following us for a lot more cool fun stuff.
Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you soon.